And this is Mark Bunker. We started this meetup a couple months ago. I think this is like our 5th one. And we were originally starting it to come up with an idea on like how we can bring in people that talked about their design process. Because, you know, nowadays you see so much of like an end polished product, you know, from a startup. They say like there is no overnight successes. It takes you 5 years to build something, but what the consumer sees is the end product. And mainly like this is relevant also in like the digital designer space, like Dribbble. That's kind of my beef with Dribbble, is that you only see the pixel perfect product at the end of the display. It's really art, right? It's like displaying art. But you know what design is like thinking through those problems. So this is a topic I was really passionate about because, you know, this is what I do on a daily basis, and I actually come from both sides of it. You know, I started startups, I led product teams, and also hired designers from agencies and contractors. And now I started my own agency, and I'm working with small businesses on this very topic. So I've been on both sides of the equation, and it's always been difficult. The dichotomy of that relationship has always been difficult to manage, right? Like, how do you design good products for clients? So I want to kind of make this formal because, you know, there's not a lot of us here. So if you have any questions at all, just feel free to interrupt me. It's cool. But I've kind of broken it into three points. The client interface, how do you interface with the client? What is the design process that goes into that? And I'm mainly talking about like designing web projects or something that has a goal tied to it for a business. And then 3 is the end game or the end goal of the project. So 1 is the client interface. This has always been difficult because, you know, I've had so many times where clients have called me and they're like, hey, I want to do a redesign on my website because it's outdated, and it needs to do this, it needs to do that, and it has to have a shopping cart and it needs to be mobile responsive, blah, blah, blah. What's your price? You're like, what are you talking about? Who the hell are you? You're like, what do you, like, I don't even know what you do, first of all. Like, let's take a step back. So most designers and most agencies or freelancers will just basically be like, oh man, a lead, okay. Like, they'll try to work it and try to get that business, but they're starting from the wrong position. They're not starting the relationship correctly from the beginning. So what I've kind of learned over the time is how to, you know, manage this communication channel with clients to develop, have more control, creative control over the relationship as you kind of move forward through the process. So what I say is stick with the why. You know, stick to the why on why you're trying to, why you're doing anything, right? There's a book called Start with the Why, which is Simon Sinek. Have you guys ever heard of this book? Yeah. It's awesome. He's got a really good TED Talk. You should check it out. But he talks about like how you should do anything in life. You should question yourself, like, why am I about to do this, or why am I doing this, right? And so many people don't question that. They start from a different direction. And he basically started this graph that kind of shows like the why should be the goal. A lot of designers call this goal-oriented design. So the why is the goal. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to increase sales through the website? Are you trying to increase traffic, conversions? What is the goal that you're trying to put in place? The how is a strategy, right? Paul, you actually told me about this. Michael Parler from Purple Rock Scissors did a really good presentation on this that kind of broke down the strategies and tactics, but it follows the same premise. So the how is like a strategy. So in this example, it would be, okay, I want to increase sales on my website. So that's the goal. Maybe you have a dollar amount, or maybe you don't. You just want to push the needle forward. So you create a strategy that accomplishes that. So maybe it would be like creating different distribution channels that can focus the leads down, and then the tactic would be creating a landing page, creating copy, and creating like an ad campaign that attracted the right customer. So if you think about that, you know, most people will start from the what, right? They're like, what do we need to do? I need to design a website. So they start from that angle. So I've been like big on trying to, you know, even from the relationship standpoint that I've been able to communicate with my customers, is start from the very beginning, start with the purpose of what you're trying to accomplish. So it usually, like, let's just say you got the project, right, and you're working with the client, and in the first meeting, most of the time they'll push a brief on you, and they'll be like, hey, we need to do this, here's our business objectives. They'll be just basically talking about what they need to do from their business standpoint. And most of the time, it creates a conflict between what they're trying to do and what their customers actually want to do in the relationship. What are their customers' motivation? There's a rule in copywriting that I use all the time with my clients, and it's that the customers don't give a shit about you. They only care about themselves. So it's so true, right? Like, that should be your motivation. Is like, the customer doesn't care what you do. So many websites and so many marketing materials talk about, like, you read the copy and it's like, we do this and we do that. We won the best award for design in 1995 on our flash site. So it's like, the customer doesn't care about that. So the customer only cares about what the value proposition is for them. So I really dig into that, and I don't let them, from the beginning of the relationship, I don't let them talk about what their business objectives are until I really understand their place in the market and their customers that they're trying to acquire. So I'll create like almost a story about why, the reasons they exist, and who their customers are. So I'll create almost a persona in my head of the customer from the very beginning. So the goal of this is like to almost create a story that you can then design from as the project moves forward with the customer in focus first. I have a client named, the company's name is New Tech National, and they're like a multi-million-dollar business. They've been around since like 1983. The founder started it because he started the company because he was going to this pizza place when he was in college, and the pizza place got broken into, kept repeatedly getting broken into. He's like, hey, why don't we just install some cameras here? And he created his business from that. But none of that story was on their original website. So from talking to him and like trying to understand why do you even exist? What do you even do? So they do like loss prevention for big retail companies, Fortune 500 companies like Walmart. They work with Lockheed Martin and so forth. And through this discovery meeting, they were trying to push, like, here's what we want to acquire new customers. And I'm like, okay, what do you guys do? What do you provide? And they're like, well, we provide, retail security for this company. And I'm like, okay, who are the decision makers in this company that you're going after? And they're like, well, loss prevention managers, or the directors. And they want to basically, and so I'm trying to understand their motivations, that person that they're trying to sell. And so I'm like, okay, what's your competitive advantage to them? And they're like, price. We're the lowest price. We have 10,000 contractors that we can put out instantly, and our margins since we don't have to, like, we pay them on a contract, we can keep our margins low, so it's the lowest cost. And I'm like, just curious, like, give me an example of like these loss prevention managers. Who are these people? And they thought about it and they're like, well, most of them are like retired law enforcement, like 40 to 50 years old, and they make like $120,000 to $150,000 salary, and they have to manage all these different locations. And so once I started digging into their business, I realized that they don't give a shit about price. That wasn't even appealing to them. What they care about is creating a simple, they just want to make their job easier on a day-to-day basis. So we coined the tone loss prevention simplified for them. So the whole premise of the website was to communicate to that one person to simplify his life. That's who we were trying to sell. That was the entire campaign. We're trying to just simplify that guy's life. And it changed everything for them. It changed their entire sales strategy just from that one discovery, just asking the right questions. It's like a little kid. I have a little daughter. She can't quite say why to me yet, but Mark tells me all the time his daughter like just pries him until she asks why, and she can't have something until she gets it, right? So it's kind of the same thing working in a relationship. So then you go to the business objectives, I mainly stick with like digital design with a purpose of converting business or improving their user experience. I don't really do much like graphical stuff, like logo design or branding or anything like that. It's really subjective. I want to stick to like what is the purpose of this, right? So I'll go through like what their business metrics are. What are the KPIs? How do they want to increase sales? If so, like how much? And we'll set some benchmarks. But what I'm really trying to do here is figuring out what success kind of looks like in their mind. You know, what's going to make them happy from this relationship. And if you can figure out that, then you have the power in the relationship, managing them, because now they're seeing you as somebody who's going to create an investment for them. They're seeing this expense, right? Not as an expense, but as an investment to help them acquire business. And you guys, it almost puts you in the position of like working on their team instead of like being a contractor for them, working for them. You're like working together in the relationship to try to accomplish their success goals. One of the biggest things I ask a lot of times, and I know a lot of marketers ask this, is like, what is one customer worth to you? Because if you could figure out that number, then you could almost do the math in your head and be like, oh, you only need X number of customers in order to break even on this investment. So I kind of position it from there to make sure like we're in line with what they're trying to achieve on the business side. And most of the time there's holes there because what they want, you know, isn't most of the time in touch with what the customer wants. It's like, you know, they're chopping down the wrong tree, you know, they're going in the wrong direction. Sometimes you need to step back in order to see they're going down the wrong path. So in that scenario that I just gave you, I would have done it even more so. I would have really created an entire marketing and design around trying to speak to that one person, but they wanted to still appeal professional, right? So there was some give and take in the relationship, but I got more out of it than what I wanted, and it actually turned out to be better in their favor. They've already acquired customers from this campaign.
Explain what KPIs are.
Oh, sorry. Key performance indicators. So like sales number, or website impression, website visits, or website conversions. They're like metrics that you can measure.
Will they go to you and say, we want to improve conversions, like specific, like is there a specific list of
sometimes sometimes you kind of have to figure out what they're trying to do. Yeah, it depends. Like you can analyze their current traffic and what they're doing online now. If they measure that, you'd be surprised, most small businesses still don't measure this stuff. You know, it's like they don't even know. They're just like, you know, going out in space, like with no direction. Like we just hope we get more business.
They should have a website,
right?
And they have it, and they hope it does something.
Exactly. So that's exactly it. So most of the time, in my experience, like I designed this campaign website and marketing strategy for a tattoo shop, and they hired a SEO company that drove a lot of traffic to the website. They got 0 conversions from it. Nothing was converting to the website. So I completely redesigned it, created a story around their brand, and it showed emphasis on like the artist profile. And now they can measure that. We built like an online, you know, appointment registration form with a dedicated phone number. Now they're able to measure all those conversions, and it went up like drastically just from putting those metrics in place. So on the KPIs, sometimes they know it, sometimes they don't. You'd be surprised though. Like, but that's an important metric because you're trying to do something. You're either trying to increase, like if it's a marketing campaign, you're trying to increase website visits and then increase that conversion ratio on whatever it is. So yeah, you're trying to figure out like what success is to them.
Something measurable. That
right. Exactly. Okay. And then from there, like once I create like the story and create these customer personas, I start to map out the design stage of this. And I mainly just do like start to finish web projects. Like, you know, I have a partner that does the development side, so I do all the customer side and I do all the design up front and all the copy as well. And then I have a developer that builds it out and builds on the back end. If we need custom development, he builds that out. So it's just basically a 2-man team that, you know, start to finish web projects. So this is the design process. What a lot in the past, most agencies would be, okay, we're doing this project, and they get a whole brief put together, then they go off, and the designer creates 2 mock-ups. This happened in one of the agencies that I was working with before, and then we present one mock-up to the customer and like, hey, which one do you like, you know? And we put a lot more work into the one, and then half-ass the other one, just to present 2 options to them, and like, hey, which one do you like? Pick this one, you know? And they would pick that one. But then it was like, okay, you're not solving the goal. So my goal is to bring them into the design process early, because it does a couple of things. When I start with paper, right? He's gonna be a paper prototyping, I heard. So when I start with paper, it allows me to think through all the problems early and make adjustments and involve the client. Because if I just show them an end mock-up and show them, hey, here's a design idea, what do you think? They're just seeing that end thing and they're like, how much work did he actually put into it, right? But if I could bring him in, the client in early to this process, I'm showing them the thoughts that I'm thinking through their business and how all the components are going to come together from the general navigation of the screens, the copy. That's one thing I highly recommend. If you do design, learn copy, because that is the biggest thing that can derail and delay projects, is just waiting on copy. And the client is not good at this. So it's something that I think is evolving, where you should at least write the general copy. Don't put filler copy, because it's like, what's the point of that? I create the copy, or I'll have another copywriter after I create it, and then he'll basically touch it up. But I definitely recommend that, because then you could show the client the thought process early on into the stage, and instead of showing them a high fidelity mock-up that's already done. Yeah.
I'm sorry, could you just elaborate a little bit more on the concept of copy?
Copy is words, like on a website. So the value proposition, like a website shows a hero image, the main image with the main message across the top that says like iPhone, right? Like, what's the value proposition of an iPhone? So that's all the copy, all the words on the website,
So you're
all the
basically
text.
trying to avoid learners.
Avoid what?
Learners.
Reading.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the Latin, whatever.
Laura
text.
Exum.
Yeah. So yeah, I avoid that, because every other designer uses it just as filler. But if I can kind of, I think that it kind of pulls you off the focus too, because copy, Basecamp, Basecamp software?
No.
Yeah, it's a project management software by a company named 37 Signals. They're huge in the design world, and he's written a couple books that are really popular. But they see themselves as copywriters first, designers second. So that's a completely different way to think about design, is that you're writing for the user. In most websites, it's like you need to speak to somebody. So if you start there, then and use design with that, then it communicates a bigger point that you're trying to make. So
You write your copy, you draft your copy, do you include that into your prototypes and you show that as a whole
Yeah.
to the client? Or
yeah,
so-
on paper, like I'm not afraid to show them just stupid, like not even well thought through ideas yet. Like I just want to like sketch out things. Usually I do it in the first kickoff meeting and just sketch out boxes like this, like hey, I think if this is a simple landing page, the main value proposition needs to be at the top. We'll have the call to action on the right, and then I'll try to get some general ideas from them and get some feedback from there. In the next phase, which is like after I create the personas and I have a persona, usually I won't scope that into the work. I'll just do it extra. So I'm speaking to that one person. So for that example in like New Tech, I called him Bob Cop. Like he was an ex-cop sitting there with his cake job, eating at Chipotle during lunch. I don't know why all cops eat at Chipotle. Why is that? Like it's like a convention in there. It's going there. So I created like a persona in my mind. Heisenberg, if you're selling meth. And then I'll create hierarchy on the main value proposition and hierarchy also on the content. Like what is the most important feature? Also in the discovery, that's a really critical point too. Clients will always say, if they have 4 products that they sell, like every one of them is important. We want to show hierarchy to all of them. But once you dig into it, and it's like, then you discover that one of them is generating 80% of the revenue, then that one is the most important one to show, right? So, and maybe that's the one that gets the customer into their life cycle. So you design the story around that product to capture their attention. And then here's a special one that I picked up from a copywriting book called Ogilvy on Advertising. You've never heard of that?
Yeah.
David Ogilvy is like a legendary copywriter and advertiser.
Advertising.
Like Mad Men was created off of him.
Yeah, basically he's one of the agencies that had that kind of lifestyle.
Right, the 60s ad men type of. Yeah, so and a lot of back in the day, remember the old mailers that people would actually market through mail. So they'd write these letters to people to try to. And one of the stories, this guy wrote this letter. It was one of the most successful campaigns. He was selling real estate in Maui, right, on this crazy land in the middle of nowhere. And they wrote like 10,000 letters. And on the outside of it, they taped black sand to the letter, literally black sand. It's like, hey, on the outside of the message, the guy's like, they pulls it out. He's like, what is this sand? And he's like, open it up to find out. So they open up the letter, and the first line says, "This is sand from your future property in Maui." Right? It's like, so it attracted them and it got them in. So they use this formula called ADA, and basically it summarizes as attention. The first thing you want to try to do is get their attention, because we live in a world where our attention span is super slim, right? So you got to capture their attention super quick. And you think of it like an Apple website, right? Like if they're selling the iPhone and you see their Apple website, the attention grabber is going to be the high resolution of the phone. They're showing the high res image of the phone. You're like, wow, that's really pretty. Then the next phase is building interest, right? You want to create interest, and they do that by telling them interesting facts about the product. So in this case, it'd be like it's 1.5 times smaller, thinner than the previous generation iPhone. It has a 10 megabyte pixel camera built in. So it's telling you interesting facts that you read further. And then it builds you desire, right? You want to desire the product. So they're going to show you imagery of you taking selfies with it, of you holding and interacting with it. So they're trying to put the mindset that you are already using the product. So you're starting to desire it as you move forward. And then the last phase is action, take action. So it's a 4-step process that most copywriters use, but I use it in how I create landing pages or marketing pages, where you want to create a call to action, a really compelling call to action that makes them take the first step.
The first A again.
Attention,
image, desire, action.
Yep. So that's kind of something that I use. And then I'll go into the prototyping stage. So
Can I interrupt you again?
Yeah.
The personas, we're talking about working with the clients, right? Like how involved do the clients get in personas? Do they help you develop personas, or?
They don't. Well, they do by me asking them questions about who their customers are.
Okay.
Mainly is what it boils down to. You're doing a course on user personas right now, right?
Yeah, that's all I did all day, is write about how to create assumption personas when you're creating a product that's never existed, how
Right.
to find out who that target audience is.
Right, and that's a lot more difficult from a new product standpoint.
Right.
But there's a lot of insight that you can get from the current customer base. Some hacks that you could do is just doing a general pool of who the recent purchases are.
Right.
And just trying to gather an idea of what that person goes through before they're even thinking about purchasing a product, if that makes sense. What do they do in their day-to-day? Where do they hang out? Which kind of blogs do they read? Which kind of information do they look through?
But they also have an idea of a market they might want to get into.
Yeah,
That's
if
where
it's a
they're
new market.
helping you. Well,
Right.
if they're saying, hey, we're selling a lot to housewives, but we really want younger active people.
Mm-hmm.
You just go develop a couple of personas based on what you think
Right.
that would define.
Right, exactly.
You run it by them to say, is this what you're looking at?
Yeah. Most of the time I run it by them,
So-
and then you could test that kind of stuff. You can create different landing or squeeze pages to test those assumptions.
Okay.
So yeah, the personas is big. It's
what do you call it?
what is it?
A squeeze?
Squeeze page or landing page.
Okay.
It's just a page that draws focus to that one message or that one demographic. So you can run Facebook's really good at testing things, because you can hone in on the exact age, the exact area, the exact demographic audience, and you can run a small ad budget for $100 just to see what kind of engagement you get on it. So a lot of people do user testing. If it's a new market, a lot of people do user testing through Facebook, just running ads to see what kind of engagement they get, how many clicks they get, what does the click-through rate on that look like. So from here, then I'll get into more wireframing. This is Square, the swipe. I designed this. No, I designed this wireframe, but so Square, their main focus of the product is to emphasize, what they do and what the value proposition to, they have a bunch of target audiences, right? So they're trying to like appeal to anybody that's going to take credit cards anywhere, right? Whether that's a business, physical shop, or like outside people. So then I'll go into like the wireframe stages, and in this stage, I'll use a product called Envision app. It's really simple. So once you create the wireframes, you can put it into like this page that you can create a clickable prototype from it. So you can click through this, and then you can get to the second page. And then this stage, I'll really dig into the copy on this phase and hone in on the messaging and try to get that right before we even start design. So I do a lot of extra steps before I get even into like what it's going to look like, and then we go into design phase from there, and then we'll build it out and launch it. So at this stage, getting the product live and the campaign goes live, most agencies and would just, all right, we're done with the project, we're moving on, right? That's been this world forever, but it needs to change because the agency model in general needs to completely change because businesses are investing more money in user design than ever before. It's like huge departments are being built internally to do this kind of stuff. And one of my favorites is what Google Ventures is doing right now. On their design sprints, they have a whole design team that goes into projects and they do what they call design sprints. So they throw their entire team at this, like on a really high intensive program for like 2 weeks to really solve the problem that they're trying to solve in the design, and they'll build this prototype within 2 weeks and launch it, and then they get to iterate fast on it. So the goal, that there is no end game, right? It's the iteration is the game. So once you get to market, how do you make this into a live breathing product, right? You're going to be able to test your assumptions and get real active feedback in the market and change with it. So the question that I'm even struggling with on creating this type of model is, what is the best model, right? What is the best model to work with clients ongoing? Because you get through this big web project and you launch it, so what I typically have been doing in the past is creating like a model where I can just work on a retainer basis with them. But I think there's more to be like in this, almost like on the partnership side, on creating a more partnership that you can actually be in their court and pushing forward on their metrics to like really have some real benchmarks to shoot for, and you tie your compensation to that. So that's ultimately it, right? It's like growing with a client and iterating with them over time, or working with a marketing agency to help you accomplish those goals. Like that's amazing. You can hire them and blow your shit up.
Shameless bitch.
Yeah.
What does iteration mean?
Iterate is change, evolve. So when you, for example, if I'm using a product and I'm not clicking through to the second page, right? There's a hold up there. There's something that's blocking me from moving forward through the app process, and maybe I'm dropping off. Iterating would be moving the button higher on the page. That's just a dumb example. Like you just move the button up higher, so you're iterating on a product. So you're just changing it. You're evolving with the product based on how users are interacting with it. So that's like the future game, right? It's like the website is never done. It's like the website has to continue to be optimized over time.
There's never really an end product.
Right. Now there used to be. And there still is on like agencies. A lot of agencies just ship it and they're like, we're done, see you later. And then they move on.
How do you explain that to a new client when they're like in the process of thinking of hiring you and they say, hey, my budget is like $10,000.
Yeah.
And you're like, all right, well that was your website, but the website's never finished.
Right.
You're gonna have
Right.
to pay somebody, if not me, more. Like,
Yeah,
how do you break that news to them?
Well, I'll either do it like where it's like an upfront, and then I'll break that into like a 90-day program after the website's done for like iteration changes, small
so you'll
iteration
finish the
changes.
website.
Okay,
so